Welcome into the best damn college football show out there. We got Rob Veno, Ralph Michaels. I am Drew Martin. Sports Memo, WagerTalk.com is covered in this show. Guys, we're covering 3 games on today's show. Also giving out betting advice throughout. One Thursday night, one Friday night, and one Saturday game. But first off, Ralph Michaels at Cal Sports LV on Twitter. Welcome in, buddy. How you feeling?
Hey, doing good. Good weekend. Finally turned that corner. Had a couple uneven weekends. So looking forward to it. It's getting to be exciting times. Have to go back and been doing some work on the Big Ten, the Pac-12, and the MAC. So, and hell, college basketball is right around the corner as well. So normally this time of the year isn't quite this hectic, but I'm happy to have it all.
Oh yeah, I mean, normally it is like you said, not quite as hectic. It's really busy though in football season, kind of the main time for sports bettors. But now, I mean, Robbie, we're getting to a time where it's unprecedented in terms of keeping up and betting on all different kinds of sports here. Follow him on Twitter at Rob Veno Sports. Welcome in, buddy.
Good to be here, guys. Our favorite hour of the week. Just listening to Ralph talk about all the work that he has to do, and yet you could set your watch by time when he lets loose with fun facts every single morning. So on top of everything else, you can count on him. You can rely on him every single morning to hit you with something from the database. It's been getting a great response, and there's some good stuff in there, Ralph. I know I requested one last week to see if anybody had ever lost a turnover battle 5-0 and still covered the spread. And I think you came up with 1 in 90 against the spread.
We're going to talk about it. It's the Houston Cougars. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's our Friday game we're talking about. So
yeah, that will be the second game we go over here, guys. And I know we've been going over 3 games on Saturdays, but this week we're going to kind of change it up. Let us know if you're watching on replay in the comments below on YouTube, if you're liking this kind of system that we're doing here with a weekday game or 2 and then a Saturday game. And if not, we'll go back. So we'll kind of do a consensus on everybody wants to do. But Robbie, like we've started off every show here, did you learn anything from last week or really the whole college football season to date that you think bettors can use going into this week to kind of get an edge here on, weekday college football or Saturday college football betting?
Well, I think I had already learned this first fact, but it's certainly been reaffirmed that Bo Pelini is about as overrated a defensive coordinator as there is in the nation. Here's a guy who walks in against Mississippi State in their first ever trial and error run with the air raid offense and don't have the personnel to run it. And they set an SEC record for passing yards. And of course, he comes back last week and gets absolutely drilled by Missouri. And you see the quote from Ed Ogeron, right, guys? I'd rather just call one defense and get that one right. So I wouldn't be surprised. We've seen an SEC defensive coordinator firing. We'll talk about it. I wouldn't be surprised if Bo Pelini doesn't last till the end of the season. Remember that when Eddie O took over at LSU, guys helped me with the offensive coordinator he hired right out of the box and fired after 1 year. I'm missing his name right now. He was a whiz kid, but I'll look it up. But they don't have the patience there at LSU to sit around like this. And across the board, Drew, defense in the SEC, somewhat optional unless you're named Georgia, because right now even the good teams aren't playing a lot of defense there.
And Ralph, did you want to throw out anything you think bettors can use going forward?
Well, the biggest thing for me is underdog. We've seen the gap close with the COVIDs and the less. Year to date, college football, underdogs hitting 58.4%.
Wow.
So
that's pretty good.
That's just something, I'm not telling you to play all dogs, but if your card is heavy favorite, be careful. 58% is a powerful number. And now we're into conference play. So let me just take a look. Conference dogs this year, 59.1%, going 44-30 and 5 ATS. So, those conference dogs are barking to a tune of 60% year to date. Those are incredible numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, flirting with 60%, both overall and in conference, even better. So underdogs are hitting. And guys, check out Robbie Veno, WagerTalk.com. He is the profit leader in Sports Memo WagerTalk. All the handicappers up over 200% year to date. That's not cherry picking numbers, only from January 1st, I guess, but up over 200%. So check him out, Robbie Veno at WagerTalk.com. You can get his full season, 3-day, 7-day, 30-day. It's all available there. He's up over 200% on the year. Guys, talking about underdogs here, Ralph. Thursday, October 15th, 105, 106, the rotation number. And guys, we're going to talk Georgia State, Arkansas State Thursday. Then we're going to talk BYU, Houston on Friday. Then we are going to talk Georgia and Alabama on Saturday. So those are the three games. We'll get best bets at the end, just to let you know the kind of outline here. And guys, everybody welcome in on the chat. Brian, JDA, welcome in. Nate, Mike Campbell, what is up? Johnny Outlaw saying the Three Musketeers, proud Babylonian. All of you guys joining in on the chat box on Wager Talk YouTube. Welcome in. Love seeing you guys. But we got to get to this first game here, Ralph. Georgia State, Arkansas State. Talking about a dog here that I like. +3 in the hook, Georgia State, the Panthers. I think they're underrated in the betting markets. I'm likely going to be on that side, Ralph. 71.5 being the total. It is on the road here. Not a short week for Georgia State, though. What are you thinking in this Sun Belt matchup, Ralph?
Yeah, it is the short week versus the rested team. So, there's not enough scenarios to pull up to give you a number from the database. But, you have a team in Georgia State that's only played 2 games against a Red Wolves team playing their 5th game. So, again, that a rarity as well. Sean Elliott's done a great job. He returned 16 starters, 8 on each side of the ball. And that Louisiana game, went down to the wire. They actually had a 26-23 first down edge in the opener and then just manhandled East Carolina. I was on the wrong side of East Carolina. But then you look at what East Carolina did this past week and you say, wow, for Georgia State to have a 193-yard edge against East Carolina and beat them by 20 and to see what East Carolina did the next week, it's a pretty good East Carolina team. So you always have to go back now as we're progressing through the season, games 1, 2, 3, and 4, to see, well, was that really a good win? Or was that a team that we thought maybe was better than they were? So East Carolina, clearly a good win. You look at Arkansas State, they had 15 returning starters, 9 on the offensive side, 6 on the defensive side. A 2-2 record is probably what they expected, but I'm sure they didn't expect to lose by 30 or 29 points to Coastal Carolina and beat Kansas State, in a game where they dominated with a 130-yard edge. So we've seen up and down play. We've seen them use Bonner. We've seen them use Hatcher. They're a pass-happy team. Couple stats I want to throw out. Arkansas State as a conference home favorite, 15-4. And while Georgia State's only 2-10 straight up on the road, they're a team that was progressing. And remember, this Georgia State team is the same team that went into Tennessee in the season opener last year and beat them. So, I'm looking at going to be the obvious. On one side, you have a defense that allowed 519 yards to Louisiana, playing their first road game. On the Arkansas State side, I have a team allowing 24 first downs per game. I have a team allowing over 153 yards rushing, 457 yards per game. It's a high total, but the weather's great. The weather's going to be in the 50s. Light winds. I'm actually going to go ahead and lean over. One last stat before I go to Robbie. Anderson is in his 7th year at Arkansas State. He has played this short week 10 times from Saturday to Thursday, or with the 4-day rest. He is actually 8-2 in those games, and he talked about it in his press conference. They don't bother me as much as some. I get excited to play on national TV in a standalone game. He's had a system where he's prepped for these short weeks, and he's done very well in them.
Yeah, that's a great stat there, Ralph. I'm glad we're doing this show right now. It might keep me off the Georgia State side. And you're right, Ralph. The Arkansas State is on a short week, the home team. I meant that as in the intro that Georgia State was not on a short week, the away team. But Robbie, Ralph throwing out some monster stats there in terms of the head coach for Arkansas State actually handling the short week pretty well in the past. How much does that affect your handicap, and what are you thinking in this game?
Yeah, I didn't know the numbers, Drew. So thanks to Ralph for pointing those out under head coach Blake Anderson, Arkansas State. We know that every season. This one's a little bit different, but every season when we get to November, the Fun Belt gets their weeknight exposure, right? Week after week, maybe 4 or 5 weeks in a row. So they've certainly been on this stage before. I'm gonna, I want to start this off, guys, with just a little bit. It's something that crossed my mind, and it's very situational. It's very team by team. But the way this season has gone, I wonder about these teams that are playing games as if they're like stop and go traffic. Georgia State, for instance, is it a disruption to play a good game and then have a game canceled by coronavirus? You can't get anything going, and play another game and have another week off there. And they haven't played back-to-back games all season long, yet the two that they've played have been pretty good outings. I just wonder if this starts to affect the team negatively, or is the week off a good thing? You're used to basically getting 1, possibly 2 bye weeks, and they don't come every other week like they've come for a lot of teams here. Something I'll look at this week. We'll see. I mean, for Georgia State, it has been play, don't play, play, don't play, get ready for a team, get it canceled. To me, that's kind of difficult. If I just look at the fundamentals here, and I'll add to that, guys, because Arkansas State, you talked about not rested. On top of not rested, it's their 3rd game in 13 days. So that's a game every 4 days almost. So for Arkansas State, they've been very, very busy playing football while the other team has been, practicing more than they're playing. Fundamentals in this game real quick. The Georgia State offensive line, to me, that very first game against ULL was very impressive, the way their offensive line uprooted the Louisiana defensive line. Now, I always have to remember that into that game, Lafayette had a lot of COVID cases. That was coming off of the Iowa State win. They got hit with a lot of coronavirus. They didn't have a number of players for that game. Still, Georgia State covered. They were in the lead for the majority of the game. Wind up losing. Ralph talked about the amount of total yards that they gave up. It was quite a few. In this game, you would expect Georgia State with that offensive line to try and run the football and keep Arkansas State's passing game off the field, right? The 2 quarterbacks, Hatcher, Bonner. If you haven't seen them yet, those watching this show, number 6, Jonathan Adams, the kid who absolutely tore up Kansas State. He's an NFL player. They've got receivers on this team. But I want to point out here, and this sort of goes to Ralph saying he would side somewhat with the over in this game, that Coastal Carolina tried this blueprint against Arkansas State. Run the football. They ran it almost 64% of the time in that game. Control the clock, win time of possession. They won time of possession against Arkansas State 41-21 to 18-39. Almost 23 minutes more possession for Coastal Carolina in that game. Let's add to it real quick that in that particular game, Coastal Carolina had touchdown drives that took 8 minutes and 38 seconds, 7 minutes and 57 seconds, so basically 2 8-minute drives, an 8 and an 8.5, and 5 minutes and 26 seconds. You total that up, 3 touchdowns in that game by Coastal Carolina, running the football and chewing clock, took 22 minutes and 1 second. Right off that's over a third of the game with just 3 possessions. Right off the bat, you would say that game had to go under. That game scored 75 points. So it doesn't matter with Arkansas State if you're going to chew up the clock, because in their 18 minutes, they found their way to 23 points in that contest. I don't think they'll get dominated time of possession the way they did in that contest, but Georgia State certainly is going to try. Arkansas State can score very, very quickly. We know that with the deep passing game. I think it's a little bit different than what Georgia State has faced, because Georgia State has faced 2 dual threat quarterbacks, right? Holton Ahlers from East Carolina, dual threat. Levi Lewis, ULL, dual threat. Bonner and Hatcher basically sit back in the pocket and find open receivers. I don't know that Georgia State can get pressure on Arkansas State. This matchup just works, guys, both ways for both offenses. So unless you get something that I've seen way too much of in games that I've been involved in throughout the first 5 weeks, where teams drive the length of the field and turn the ball over inside the 10 and waste scoring opportunities. I've seen that a lot this year. Unless that happens, this game's probably getting over 72. I would agree with Ralph. the power ratings, Drew, make Arkansas State a little bit heavier favorite than the 3.5 that they're giving. And one more time, I would rather have the team that's in a more fluid situation playing game after game after game than the team like Georgia State, which plays and stops, plays and stops, plays and stops.
Yeah, that's kind of a tough one, Robbie, just because it's almost tough to go back in a database and say, you know, this team played and then stopped and then played and how did they do? So you kind of just got to – it's a little bit of a tricky handicap here. But, Ralph, did want to come back to you. What was the stat you had on Arkansas State's head coach in short weeks?
He is 8-2 in those 10 games with the Saturday, Thursdays.
Saturday, Thursday is this – okay. Man, that's a good one there, Ralph. Well, guys, we got Friday night action here. BYU at Houston, 109-110, 9:30 p.m. Eastern kick here on Friday Night Lights. Looks like Houston is catching 5 at home, 63 being the total. Robbie, coming to you first here, man. Any interest in betting the Friday Night Lights action, BYU at Houston?
Well, it's a great contrast in styles, right? You get the speed of Houston and the power of BYU. You get two really good quarterbacks. Zach Wilson, in my estimation, certainly the higher rated NFL prospect than Clayton Tune. But Clayton Tune showed you that in that Dana Holgerson system, when he gets it rolling with his core of wide receivers, they get it rolling. So this is interesting from both of those aspects, guys, because I don't know which team can handle the strength of the other. If I start with that Houston wide receiver core, Marquez Stevenson is the fastest player on the field almost every time he takes the field. And we saw a lot of that in their game last week, their season opener, where, as we mentioned early on, they lost the turnover battle 5-0. They got way behind Tulane 24-7. They didn't just steamrolled them the rest of the way 42-7. But Stevenson, Corbin, Singleton, these receivers, they just keep coming at you. BYU has seen nothing like it. And I'll point to last week, guys, when they played Texas San Antonio. They had themselves a bit of a lead. Maybe they got a little happy at halftime because they've been destroying teams. But in the second half of that game, Texas San Antonio goes to their third-team quarterback, former starter, Lowell Narcisse. Narcisse comes in the game and goes 17 of 20 for 229 yards, all in the second half, and throws 2 touchdowns over 30 yards plus. Now, if you're going to give up touchdown passes outside the red zone, then Houston's not an opponent for you because you're going to have trouble handling that. Like I say, it's a question of whether or not BYU got happy with the lead and thought they had that team handled. It's very possible, but Texas San Antonio really hadn't thrown the ball like that all season long. So we'll see if it causes trouble. I think it will. The BYU secondary has seen Navy, which in their opener, which doesn't throw. Troy, which had a freshman quarterback or a new starting quarterback in his second start, Gunnar Watson. Louisiana Tech, 2 brand new quarterbacks on the road, Luke Anthony and Austin Allen. First real test for BYU secondary. We'll see if they can handle it. I think the key to Houston is making sure that their quarterback doesn't get touched. Because if BYU's too slow in the secondary, they'll have to resort to pass rush to contain Houston. And if Houston can keep Tune protected, and in that offensive system, I think they can, you can see the bullets flying for that team. And one more thing to note here real quick, fundamentally, that Houston tempo might wear BYU's defense out, guys, because BYU hasn't faced an extreme tempo like this all season long. So they're not at home. They're not in the thin air, but they're down in Houston where it can be very humid. You might see BYU wear out across that defensive front against that tempo. Now, the other side of that coin is BYU's offensive line has been one of the best in the country all season long. And Houston's got their hands full trying to defend BYU running the football and then trying to defend Zach Wilson passing the football. He's completed almost 80% of his passes on the season. I think it's 79 and change right now, Zach Wilson. So they can strike both ways. I go back to week 1 when, even though they had injuries, their offensive coordinator said, Jeff Grimes said, we're going to be a very good offense. Zach Wilson reiterated that. We're going to be a very good offense, and they have been. They've scored, if I look at the total here real quick, guys, BYU has scored 45-plus points in 3 of their 4 games. And yet they're 3-1 to the under, which makes no sense, right? They're scoring 45 and above, and yet they can't get but 1 game over the total. It's a tribute to their defense. It's also a product of the opposition. But if they get anywhere near 40 here, they're not holding Houston down. And this game could easily get over. I think this is one of those shootouts up and down the field. Unless there's a lot of mistakes made, that Houston offense in all likelihood doesn't get stopped. And BYU, whichever way they choose to move the football, I don't think they got stopped. Tulane was not as physical as BYU is going to be. So for me, I'd probably look over, Drew.
And Rob, I like where you're going with this. You bring up some good points, some interesting points in terms of BYU hasn't been tested yet, but BYU is the team that's played, 4 games now?
Right.
Whereas Houston's only played 1 game. Against Tulane, I mean, you could kind of make the argument that Houston really hasn't been tested all that much. It's not like Willie Fritz's, Green Wave offense is really lighting it up. Does that scare you at all? And I bring that up only because I do agree with you. Houston has extra preparation time for this game, catching points. I like that type of profile at home. It's just, I mean, to play devil's advocate here, Houston really hasn't been tested, have they?
Yeah, no, you're not playing devil's advocate here, Drew, because I'm right with you. I think that they have not faced, from a defensive standpoint, they haven't faced this type of power offense. Like I say, that offensive line for BYU is probably going to maul Houston. Tulane doesn't come close offensive line-wise to what BYU has. And then on the defensive side of the football, they'll pick on what BYU can't handle, which is the secondary. So I think matchups work both ways. I think it's a step up in class for particular units on both sides. For BYU's defense, this is a huge step up in class to face the Houston offense. For Houston's defense, this is a huge step up in class to face BYU's power offense, which also, like I say, can throw the football down the field. Almost 80% completions out of Wilson. Kid's going to play in the NFL, so I think that both these teams move the football. No problem.
Ralph, what are you thinking? Friday Night Lights action, man.
I'm going to add some comments to Rob first. Agreed with the weather statement, Rob, but I'm going to take it a step further. BYU got very fortunate. This game is Friday. Thursday is going to be in the 90s. Friday at game time, 68 degrees and 12-mile-an-hour winds. So they get a cold front coming in on Friday. So they completely are lucky in that sense where they're not going to get worn out because of the heat and humidity. Your comments on Zach Wilson. People look at Zach Wilson from last year and had 11-9 ratio. Nobody in the country knew he had a bad wrist last year. He played the whole year, had off-season surgery. They never talked about it. The coaches never talked about it. So go back to 2 years ago when he had a 12-3 ratio. Add in the 8-1 ratio. That's the quarterback you have with Zach Wilson. Guys, you guys know I put out a college football stat compare, and it's great to know when you're comparing yards per game, points per game, and yards per play, what the competition is. We talked about Houston not being tested. We talked about BYU not being tested. 76 teams have played games this year so far. BYU strength of schedule, 63. Houston strength of schedule, 64. So both are bottom 15. Again, that shows that these stats can be very misleading. But with that said, this Houston team, boy, I had a 5% play on them when they were playing Baylor, a game that got COVIDed out. This team had 19 returning starters, plus Dana Holgerson had his pick of multiple JUCOs. This team really has 23 returning starters, plenty of talent. I think they are going to be able to move the ball on BYU. BYU, the offenses BYU's faced, again, only 76 teams, 49, 52, 59, and 74. Every offense they faced, bottom of the road. Road game. Their first road game was at Navy. That wasn't a true road game. We know Navy wasn't prepared. Now they have to play away from home. We'll see how that affects them. And to me, I agree with the over as well. I do lean Houston, though. I think with that back door open, with the speed of BYU, giving this Houston team over a field goal at home, I'm not sure if either is going to make my card, but definite leans with the home dog and the over.
Good stuff on the Battle of the Cougars, Friday Night Lights action. Guys, we got one game left here on Saturday. It is 8 p.m. Eastern kick, 5 p.m. Pacific. Number 3 versus number 2. We're talking the Georgia Bulldogs at the Alabama Crimson Tide. Interesting note here, it is on CBS, even though it is a night game. 57 being the total here, Robbie. And we're seeing Alabama -6. There is a couple shops with -6.5, but primarily -6 here. Battle of SEC East, SEC West, 2 top teams and most projections here. What are you thinking with the Bulldogs and Tide Saturday night?
Well, I'm going to be a little bit simple here, Drew, and I'll apologize for being so simple and not as in-depth on this, but I'm going to leave it at that. Yeah, because I don't want to get too caught up in the weeds here with everything. From what I've seen, and I'm going to trust my eyes right now, I'll side with the +6 and the defense. Georgia's defense, while there have been a couple of small portions in games, including the Tennessee game last week, first half, where it looked like they could be hurt. They have come back in both of those games and really defended strong. I mean, this is a team that's given up total yardage-wise 214, 216, 280. In modern-day college football, those are halves. Those aren't full games. So that defense, as good as Alabama's offense is, they won't contain it. They won't shut it down, but they can slow it down at certain times, and I feel like they can get enough stops to where their offense can, respond and stick within 6 points. I don't like the fact that in the middle of game week or at the beginning of game week, Alabama chooses to fire their defensive coordinator, Pete Golding. He's fired. Charlie Strong steps in. Charlie Strong, while he may not have been a great head coach in some spots, he's a terrific defensive coordinator. But in the middle of Georgia week or at the beginning of Georgia week, I'm just not so sure that changing things around, scrambling them around with 6 days to prepare for Georgia, or 5 days as it is right now, I don't know that that's a good thing. Georgia's locked in defensively right now, and Alabama's scrambling to find an answer defensively right now. Mac Jones likely to be under pressure that he hasn't been under all season long so far. The Georgia wide receivers who have found some openings here may find some openings here again because Alabama has not been totally locked down. Now, Mississippi, guys, and you always have to preface these things because Lane Kiffin play calling and Mississippi's offensive system compared to Georgia's offensive system, let's face it, Mississippi's built for point scoring. Georgia's not necessarily built for point scoring, but I think they can find enough openings here and play with their defense or lean on their defense to keep this thing fairly close. It's at Alabama where you'll have limited fans. Okay. But this is becoming, as I go through Alabama games, Drew, Auburn obviously is always the number 1 game on the schedule. It always will be. In the West, LSU might become the number 1 game for years to come. But this Georgia game is developing into, and a lot has to do with the fact that it's Nick Saban against Kirby Smart, and the fact that Kirby Smart, I think Ralph pointed out his recruiting numbers the last 5 years. I think they're number 1 recruiting-wise, if I remember Ralph right from the summer.
Yep.
This is becoming a monster rivalry, and Kirby Smart wants to win one of these. They've come close when there's been more separation between the two teams talent-wise. The separation gap, to me, is closed somewhat. I think Georgia +6, the right way to go here. I could be wrong, but I'll lean on the better defense, and I'll play against the team that's scrambling to find a solution on defense.
Ralph, this is an interesting one. I mean, yeah, Robbie brings up the fact, going up against this former assistant. I believe Nick Saban is either 20 or 21-0 against former assistants after beating Lane Kiffin in company. But I do think Georgia's offense and Ole Miss's offense are vastly different, like Robbie was saying. I'm actually on the other side here, Ralph. I would lay it here with Alabama. I think you get the better offense, the better quarterback. And yes, you are laying a number here, but you're at home. I like Bama -6. How do you feel?
The funny thing is, Robbie, I agree with you. I perceive this as a rivalry. Do you know how many times they played in the regular season the last 4 years? 0.
Yeah.
They've only played 2 games in 4 years. It was the SEC championship one year and the national championship in the other. So as far as a rivalry, Georgia hasn't been to Tuscaloosa since 2007. So, there's a lot of newness to this. Although the teams are familiar, this is a unique rivalry for sure, being on opposite divisions and not having played in the regular season. So we'll see what that means. Sidewise, you look at Alabama, okay, and let's put your numbers in perspective, Robbie. You reeled off Georgia's defensive yards per game that they allowed. So you add up Georgia for the season, 3 games, they've allowed 710 yards. Alabama allowed 647 last week. So, I mean, it puts it in perspective how well they've done. Let's see. When you're averaging 1.5 yards per carry allowed on defense and you're averaging 55% completions, granted, the Auburn offense, we know, struggled. The Arkansas offense, but Tennessee is a good offense. Tennessee can run the ball, and they were a good offense. And to hold Tennessee to 1 yard rushing was a job. But again, that was at home with Tennessee with some fans. Their only road game at Arkansas, that was Arkansas, the first game of the season. I'm going to go this route. I just tweeted this, and it was funny. I was listening to a pod doing some work on this game, and the guy, I'm not going to mention who it was, the guy on the pod goes, there's no way I'm not betting Alabama and Nick Saban at home as a single-digit favorite. There's just way too much value in that. So then what do I have to do? I have to go look at my database, right? Since 2017, when Alabama is a single-digit favorite, they are 3-4 straight up. They've lost 4 games straight up as a single-digit favorite, and they're 2-5 against the spread. So, again, you guys, when you're listening to these pods, make sure you're listening to the people that know their numbers or look up these numbers. Right. That bothers me the most about hearsay and what people say, and it just drives me nuts. But
Ralph, you got to say the name, though.
That's not going to change my mind here. I'll tell you what. To me, Nick Saban has a we're off a loss mentality. Yeah, we won that game, but in the locker room, I'm sure his defense felt like they lost that game. I'm sure the way they work out this week, they felt like they lost that game. You have Georgia, and, you have Stinson Bennett now. Making a road start at Arkansas is fine. He put up 387 yards and 19 first downs. Making your second road start or your first real road start at Alabama is an entirely different story. I lean under, but I'm going to go under the first half. I think Georgia can expose them later, will break out some plays. We know, I think Saban's offense plays up to the level of defense. When his defense is struggling, he goes up tempo more. But Alabama really doesn't want to run a lot of plays. I'm going to go first half under. I think it's a feeling out. It's national championship revenge. It's 2 good defenses, and I'm still going to put Alabama in a good defense because I don't care that they're giving up 479 yards per game with A&M and Mississippi. At the end of the year, if you say choose 10 defenses that you want in the country, I'm going to guess Alabama's close to being in my list if they're not in my list. So he's going to get those things straightened out. He'll jump more into the coaching on the defense this week. So I like the first half under in this game, and I'm going to go it's a game that I have in the mix, actually, to make my card in that situation.
All right, looking towards the under there. Robbie, anything you wanted to follow up to that on the Georgia-Bama game?
Well, I think we'll learn a lot, Drew, because I know while Ralph was going through his analysis there, your question was, but what offenses has Georgia played? And it's a great point, right? You've played Arkansas, although I'll say this. Sam Pittman's doing a hell of a job at Arkansas after 3 games. But the offense, we're just talking about their offense, right? Felipe Franks did have a nice game last game. We'll see if that continues. The offenses that Georgia's faced, you're absolutely correct. Arkansas, Auburn, Tennessee, pretty good offense. But then the counter to that is, and this is why we're going to learn something, is what defenses has Alabama played? They've racked up a ton of yards against Mizzou, which has been lit up twice. 3 times, actually, if I count Tennessee, they gave up 35 points. So they've been lit up. A&M just got lit up by Florida. They have not been a good defense so far this season. And Ole Miss, I mean, that had to be, and I had to put it on Twitter, the most incredible statistic I've ever seen in my life. If every time Alabama where they touched the football, where their starting scrimmage point began, if they gained every single yard in that game in their 11 possessions, it would have totaled 764 yards. Too bad they only got 723 of them. Ole Miss only stopped them from gaining 41 yards en route to the end zone all game long, which it's absolutely incredible. So, we know what Lane Kiffin is. Or what he's got for personnel on that team. It's going to be an outstanding offense. It's going to give everybody fits. Boy, I can't wait till Ole Miss gets a hold of my friend Bo Pelini and LSU. But that's digressing a little bit. The point being that Alabama hasn't faced a good defense yet, not in this not close to this caliber. So we'll learn a lot about each one of those units. The Bama offense, they're going to face a huge step up in class defensively. And the Georgia offense, the Georgia defense playing Alabama's offense. I just happen to think that the 6 is worth taking here with Georgia. I think it's a very close game.
Okay, and we got questions out there about team totals. And guys, you could always break down what the team totals are going to be just by looking at the total and then kind of doing the math with who's the favorite. So the Georgia team total will be in the mid 20s. Any opinion here on either team total, guys?
I don't, because like I said, if I'm looking at first half under, I'm expecting things to open up. So, let's just give them, the example. If you have a line, what's the total in Alabama? 71.5? No,
57.
57.
57.
So yeah. So if you take 57 and you divide it in half, that's 28.5. And then you split the 6, go up 3 and down 3. So you're talking 31.5 and you're talking 25.5. So of that, if you say, can Georgia get to 25, or do you think, if I break them down, I think I like Georgia over 25.5 more than I like Alabama over 31.5. But that's a good way. That's a second way that a lot of times I handicap a game, Drew. You break out the team totals and you say, which is more likely? Which team can get to their team total? Then you put them back together and you look what you like side and total.
Yeah. That was a great discussion there, guys. It sounds like we're all a little bit different here. I'm liking Alabama, Robbie liking Georgia, and Ralph, you're liking first half under, right?
Yep.
All right, guys. Well, we got best bets as well. So those are the 3 games we were breaking down. Robbie, you want to start us off with what you're liking best bet for the whole week, weekday or Saturday, man?
Let me start off with this. For those of you who have followed this show since the season began and since we started doing these best bets, we're spotless right now, Drew.
Yeah.
Haven't lost one yet. So I want to continue that. I think 5-0 up to this point. In my case, I always pick from one of the games that we discuss and analyze on this show. So I'll do that again, and I'll leave you with BYU Houston over. I just don't see any way that this game does not top the total, the current total. For me, Houston, and Ralph brought up a great point about the temperature being lesser, a little bit of a cold front if you live in Houston, 68 degrees. But I still think that the extreme tempo could wear Brigham Young down. Fourth quarter, we'll still see scoring, and I don't see Houston stopping Zach Wilson in that running game either. That offensive line for BYU is a beast. So the quickness and the power, I think this thing gets, over 70. So I'll take that thing over. What's the current, Drew? Like 63? Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah, there is a 62.5 out there. I don't know how you guys want to handle best bets. I mean, the consensus is 63. So are we doing best
that
number or okay?
Yeah,
So
let's
63.
use that.
Yeah,
if it goes anything like
cherry pick one, yeah.
If it goes anything like the North Carolina Virginia Tech over last week, I'll be in good shape.
Okay, so
damn, Rob, you must be old. I can't even think of the last time I heard someone call them Brigham Young. I honestly, you know what I mean? It sounded so weird out of your mouth that, like, seriously, when have you heard someone call them the Brigham Young Cougars?
They don't. And that's like something you would hear Ray Scott say on Raycom television.
Yeah, wow. I am going to Middle Tennessee. Middle Tennessee was a best bet for me last week and got past FIU. And this North Texas team just keeps underperforming despite the talent they have. They're now 1-9 ATS, their last 10 on the road. This Middle Tennessee offense has really has got it going the last couple weeks. So I like Middle Tennessee minus the points. I think they handle the Mean Green.
Okay, so like an MTSU, what's the best number you got there, Ralph? Looks like -6.5. It's -6.5 or -7. So
Yeah.
there are multiple books at 6.5. I'll stay in that same trend there, Rob. Same conference anyway. We got Charlotte hosting FIU, looking to fade FIU and the Panthers. I like the Charlotte 49ers. You can grab a -7, -120 at Bet Online right now, but consensus is -7 in the hook. So I'll be the good sport here and check the -7 in the hook on the Charlotte 49ers. So, guys, that's it for best bets. In recap, we got Robbie Veno, 5-0 in best bets this year in the show. BYU Houston over 63. We got Ralph Michaels, MTSU -6 in the hook. And I am on Charlotte -7 in the hook. So, Ralph at Cal Sports LV on Twitter. Guys, he's a great follow. I definitely recommend it. Ralph, anything you want to throw out before we shut this down?
Nope. It's we're seeing some big games. Obviously, Georgia, Alabama, the biggest game of the year. But like I said, it's not a game that kills either season.
Yeah.
Because they could still meet again in the SEC championship. And, if whoever loses this wins the SEC championship, we can have two SEC teams in because we already know the Big 12's out. If Clemson goes from the ACC, you're looking at two SEC teams and Ohio State, whoever comes out of the Big Ten. So this isn't a deal killer for either team.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, Ralph. I mean, in terms of a rivalry, maybe, because of the recruiting and the coaching, but actually in terms of how much importance is in this game, I mean, both teams can win the national championship, whoever loses, right?
Yeah. As long as you run the rest of the table and you win the SEC championship. So, yeah, the loser of this is not out. So, there's a lot of times where, we play the bubble burst where teams loses their national championship hopes by losing that game or that second game. Mm-hmm. That is a bubble burst for those teams that thought they had legitimate shots. This is not a bubble burst game. So just remember that for next week. This doesn't ruin. I mean, how many times? I mean, you guys probably both do it. When Michigan loses to Ohio State the next week, you fade them in that bowl. All those teams that lose that championship game, you fade in the bowl. Right. Well, the same thing happens during the regular season. Maybe not this early in the regular season, but if you're Alabama and you're Georgia, you know that a second loss, you're done. That is a legitimate bubble burst for you because your national championship hopes are diminished at that point.
And Robbie Veno on Twitter at Rob Veno Sports. Find his work at WagerTalk.com. And guys, by the way, he's up over 200% ROI, return on investment, up over 200 plus 205%. Find all of his work at WagerTalk.com. Robbie Veno, anything you want to throw out before we shut this down?
Yeah, I just want to enhance what you guys used as best bets here, Drew. Charlotte, was there any team that benefited more from a coronavirus week off than Charlotte? Because remember that week, Chris Reynolds, the quarterback, was hurt, and Chris Reynolds got healthy. And boy, Charlotte, with him at the helm, is a far different team. And for Middle Tennessee, the difference in play by Asher O'Hara the last 2-3 weeks. Remember, he started the season out so slow, couldn't figure out why. But the last couple of weeks, he's come on strong, and so is that MTSU offense, which, Coach Stockstill thought would be the strength of their team. So like both of those sides there as well. Let's see if we can't nail 3-0 this week. And for the Georgia-Alabama thing, the developing rivalry really does come, Ralph, because it seems as if they're going to face in this SEC title game so often now. Georgia seems to have taken over the SEC East, and with Alabama out of the West, they may see each other. There's a little bit brewing there, developing rivalry, even though that's West versus East, and they don't face each other on the schedule each and every year.
I just want to put one thing in perspective, guys. Rob, what an incredible year, plus 200%. But I want to put that in perspective, what that means for people. If you bet every one of Rob's plays for $100 per percent, so if you were playing $300 on a 3%, 400 on a 4, 500 on a 5%. That means since January 1st, you are up $20,000. So a 200% number is nice, but let's put it in a dollar perspective. Rob has a lot of volume. I'm not saying everyone plays every game, but if they do, you're up $20,000 betting Rob's games this year. And someone did ask if your power ratings were up. You do have them up on your homepage, right?
They are up, and not without a little help again, Ralph. Boy, I'm the most technically challenged person on this panel.
Doesn't matter.
And I had to lean on James today to get it done for me, but he did. So they're up, folks. Go get them. Download
them at Robbie Veno's handicapper page, WagerTalk.com. Like Ralph said, huge moneymaker there at WagerTalk.com. Robbie Veno. Shout out to Paco Healy with that question. Guys in the chat box, everyone out there, John, Jake, Brett, Mike Campbell, Paco Healy, Robert Rainey, all you guys, more than I can name. We really appreciate you joining us each and every Tuesday, 11 a.m. Pacific, breaking down 3 or 4 games with best bets. We'll do it all season long. So for Ralph Michaels, Robbie Veno, I am Drew Martin. Best of luck until we talk next, guys.